Hey, podcast listeners. We know you're tuning into this episode despite your busy schedule because you want to stay up to date in your NP practice. Good news. There's another way we can help, and it comes with the opportunity to earn your required CE credits and pharma contact hours from home or on the go. This spring, join us for the National Conference for Nurse Practitioners, a twice-yearly virtual event sponsored by us at the podcast. With more than 35 sessions delivered by expert speakers on a broad range of clinical topics in primary, urgent, acute, and emergency care, NCNP has you covered. You and your advanced practice peers will enjoy talks on clinical guideline updates, best practice advancements, and professional development trends across all specialty areas. Attend live from April 24th through the 26th, 2024, or tune in to recorded sessions at your convenience in the 90 days after the event. Either way, claim up to 55 CE credits and 35 pharma contact hours through the 90-day deadline. Visit tnpj.com and click the NCNP tab to learn more and register. In this episode of the Nurse Practitioner Podcast, Dr. Viktor Cherkessy discusses visiting Ukraine since the war began and working in the healthcare system. We once again welcome Dr. Viktor Cherkessy, Doctor of Nursing Practice in Dermatology. Dr. Vic, as he is known, practices clinical dermatology in Cleveland and Chattanooga, Tennessee. You will often find him speaking at dermatology and primary care conferences around the country. He has been a member of the Nurse Practitioner Journal's editorial board for 20 years, and we're very happy to have him join us today. Welcome back, Dr. Vic.
Always a pleasure and a privilege to participate in these podcasts. Thank you so much.
Dr. Vic, you have been a regular on our podcast schedule for the past few years, and our audiences have enjoyed hearing your thoughts on a wide range of dermatology issues. But today, I believe we are going to hear a completely different topic from you. Can you give our audience a preview?
Yeah, I've been to the country of Ukraine twice in the last year, 2023, in March and in October, crossing into November, since the war began. And I've been very busy assisting the government and local hospitals in some of the major cities in caring for civilians and soldiers who've been grievously wounded, plus other healthcare issues. As well, this current conflict has opened a number of opportunities to make an impact in their healthcare system, as I'll be sharing with you, and introduce them to the concept of nurse practitioners.
Most excellent. Can you tell our audience a little background of the history of Ukraine?
I can. For full disclosure, I am Ukrainian. I was born in America. Both my parents, my dad turns 95 this month. He and my mom were born in Ukraine, suffered through World War II, and made it here to the United States. They made sure that we spoke the language, which always surprises folks when I travel over there. They're like, whoa, you were born in America and you have a very little accent. Though I admit I do have a bit of an American accent. I don't know if you've ever played the game Risk. Risk is a board game in which you flatten it out and you look at it in smack dab in the middle, one of the larger countries and the most difficult to hold. In blue happens to be Ukraine. So the idea is world domination, and this breadbasket of Europe is very hard to hold on to, and that's what's happened in real life. Back in the year 482 AD, which if you follow history is about the time of the fall of Rome, there were three brothers and a sister that founded the city of Kiev, named after one of the brothers, on the banks of the Dnieper River. And it's also known as Dnipro, which would be back and forth with Russian and Ukrainian names these days. And they founded the city back in 482 AD. And Ukrainians are made of a mixture of two major groups, Vikings, Scandinavians, and Mongols. Mongol horde under Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan came through the 1200s, 1300s and devastated Ukraine. And the genetic mix is that I am of both groups, which is interesting because I did the genetic testing and it found that I was very, very Ukrainian with a little mix from Scandinavia and a little mix from Mongolia, which was what my father said the result would be, and I could have saved $100. So what happens with Ukraine is it founds this city, Kievan Rus it was called, and Moscow, which is the capital of Russia, is not even a thing until 1147. So, 600 years later, there's Moscow. What happens is that there's a gentleman by the name of Yuri Dolorukhy. almost like longhand, Doloruchy, he goes from Kiev and founds the city of Muscovy, this area which we know as Moscow today. So you've got hundreds of years of Ukrainian existence before there's even a Russian one. Russians, of course, today have their own idea of history, but yeah, we're there. We've been there. References to Ukraine far before there was any Russia. So in the 1300s, the Mongols came and absolutely devastated Ukraine and kept them under their thumb for a number of hundreds of years. So what happens is we have Ukraine that is absolutely under the thumb of the Mongolian horde, which was a very violent group at the time that really hurt Ukraine. Moscow is shielded for the most part and grows quite powerful. In the 1600s, they have a gentleman by the name of Ivan Grozny, or Ivan the Terrible, and he, of course, is the first of the Russian Tsars. He looks down at Ukraine, which has just shaken its head from what happened the last few hundred years under the Mongol horde, and brings Ukraine under their thumb. So Ukraine has suffered a great deal for the last few hundreds of years under the Russian thumb and has looked at liberation over and over again. Russia, which I don't hold personally, Russians themselves, understandably so, there's different individuals. I have Russian patients, which, we have great discussions and I treat them with dignity and respect. There's no need to stereotype people. So we know the history is that we've tried to be free and maintain our language, our heritage, our culture, our people, our civilization, our thoughts and dreams for the future, self-determination. And of course, communism wasn't kind either. So my parents went through the Veliki Holod, or the Great Famine of 1930 to 33, when millions of Ukrainians died when Soviet Russia removed food from Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, and Ukrainians died left and right. World War II wasn't very happy either. Something that in this lengthy introduction I wanted to let people know is I heard a rumor that Ukrainians supported Nazis when they first came. Yes, it's true. What happened was, after hundreds of years and decades of pain from the Soviet system, under Joseph Stalin in particular, that when the first Germans came, the Ukrainians saw this as liberators. I mean, how bad does it have to be that when Hitler comes to your town, you're like, oh, good, this has got to be better than what we've been putting up with. So the Russians never forgave the Ukrainians in those early months when the Germans came, and many Ukrainians supported the Germans because they promised them liberation. Come to find out, they were trapped between a rock and a hard place. Finally, of course, when the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine has been able to maintain, to a certain degree, its independence. So that's our background to the history of Ukraine. I could have told you a lot more, but I guess maybe we have other things to share.
Well, we're definitely learning some new information. Can you remind us how we got to this current conflict?
Yeah, a lot of Americans are not aware that in 1994, Bill Clinton approached Boris Yeltsin, who was the leader of Russia at the time and president of Ukraine, and he offered a deal. And Clinton's idea was to have less proliferation of nuclear weapons. Many people don't know that Ukraine was the third largest nuclear power in the world, and is at that time, and is the only country in the history of the world that had nuclear weapons and gave them up. The United States came to Ukraine and said, listen, give all your nuclear weapons to Russia, and we promise that we will protect your territorial integrity for all time. And the Ukrainians, I remember yelling at the time, saying, no, don't do it. I was yelling at the TV, don't give up your nuclear weapons. And they did, and believed the United States. And now, of course, the United States is giving, people are saying, why are we giving billions to Ukraine? Well, the truth is, if Ukraine falls, Russia has clearly said that they will come for Poland, they want to come for the Baltic countries, and then these are NATO members. And at that point, it's a NATO war. We have a European land war, and our children will be involved. So you have individuals in Ukraine who are willing to fight for their freedom, and they're not asking for the classic boots on the ground. So while Putin is trying to bring the band back together, the Soviet Union, these countries are resisting it. And in fact, the countries that are most stressed about it were the ones that were under Soviet dictatorship, and they don't want to go back. So the Budapest Memorandum is what allowed Ukraine to give up the nuclear weapons. Now, without that, they were invaded. Actually, the war started in 2014. Everyone's like, well, I thought it was February 22nd, 2022. No, no, the war started when Russia went after Crimea. And before that, in the eastern side of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Mariupol, they were already causing a lot of trouble. What Russia does is it removes the Ukrainian population. They've done this to Georgia. They've done this to a number of other republics. Moldova, and they remove the local people, and then they bring in their people, and then they hold a vote, and everybody's like, oh yeah, we want to definitely join Russia. Well, they're the ones that the Russification has been powerful. So yeah, Ukraine is looking for NATO membership, European Union membership. They have the right to self-determination, and that's where we are right now, is we're fulfilling our treaty obligations with Ukraine.
That's sobering to hear. Dr. Vic, can you tell us how you personally got involved traveling to Ukraine, especially in a time of war? Is it really as dangerous as it sounds?
Yes, it is actually, and I can share some illustrations with you in a moment. How I got involved is there's a pretty famous nurse practitioner and my friend for 25 years, Melody Young, out of Texas, and she is a dynamic individual who is a real expert on a number of conditions, but in particular psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, which was my master's and doctorate focus. So, over the years we have grown quite close together. Well, one day she sends me a text and says, "Listen, I have a friend, Steve Orton. He's a plastic surgeon out of Dallas, Texas, and I've gone to church with him. He's a good man. He has some other friends. He just started traveling to Ukraine. I understand that you went to Ukraine many times before the war," which is true. My wife and I would offer her Paris. I would offer her a cruise down some European river. Do you want to go to Hawaii? And she would turn to me. She's not Ukrainian. She was born in Huntsville, Alabama. She says, I love Ukraine. It's inexpensive, it's clean, it's safe. They have wonderful food, museums. The country is really doing well. It has a reputation, which is true, for corruption in the past. I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago who's a lawyer there in Ukraine, and I said, how's that going? He says, we are just cracking down. The government is not putting up with this, and it's wonderful to hear. But going back to how I got there, so Melanie puts me in with Steve Orton, and I fly to Dallas. We meet at a hotel and just talk for a couple hours, all three of us. And he just said, I need someone in dermatology, and I need someone who speaks Ukrainian, because we're getting a little bit lost when we travel and need our own translators. So I said, listen, I know Ukraine very well. I've been all across the country, back and forth, north, south, east, west. I know the major cities. I have a lot of friends there. And I think going with you would be a great thing. So as to dangerous, we fly to Polish cities. Krakow is our favorite. And then the government of Ukraine provides us a van. And on every trip I've gone, there's a solid core of about 8 doctors of different specialties. Some of these individuals, I don't want to name maybe right now, but they're just in charge and in leadership in American healthcare in different specialties, whether it's orthopedics, oculoplastic, plastic surgery, GI. And having me along I'm kind of the golden retriever of the group. I'm cheerful, I'm excited, I'm happy, I speak the language, and I just try to take care of everybody and do a lot of wound care and dermatology. And of course, I've learned to do closures in Mohs, so that's very helpful on excisions and things like that. I might mention on the danger part, when you arrive into Ukraine and cross the border, and the government does give us some help. They know who we are, and they kind of expedite the system. There's miles and miles of vehicles trying to get out, so they're quite busy. Hardly anybody trying to get in. It is a place of war with rockets, missiles, drones, artillery, things like that. So we cross the border, government van. They get us to a major city, and we kind of divide up from there. Train stations travel during the night so that the Russians can't spot us. The lights are out. They do target passenger trains as well. So we're given an app that we put on our phone, and you put in the app where your region is, right? So if you're in the Kiev region, the Cherkasy, that's my last name, region. My last name is kind of popular in Ukraine, not so much in the US. And then if they triangulate that drones, missiles, rockets are on their way and it crosses where you are in your region, then it goes off and you have to seek shelter. So yeah, I mean, I was in a lot of cities and towns with absolutely blown out homes, a lot of checkpoints you have to drive through, tank traps. minefields, barbed wire, saw a lot of Russian tanks that had been blown, where troop carriers, things like that. And it's very sobering, right? So I was in Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel, Borodyanka. So I made it as far as you can go when the soldiers turn you around. So that, unless you're actually serving on the very, very front, which I did not. But I was in hospitals not too far from the front. Incidentally, when we first got there, the first trip, one of our doctors was asked to go to a soldier's hospital, which was underground. He was picked up, couldn't have a phone, and they put a bag over his head and inside a van where there was no windows. And they drove for about 40 minutes, and he came to a place which was underground, because if the Russians knew where some of these hospitals were with wounded soldiers, they would absolutely bomb them. So, he was there all day. He didn't have any pictures, but he had a lot of stories about seeing what then I eventually got to see myself.
Thanks for explaining your involvement during these uncertain times. What are some of the experiences you've had working with the Ukrainians?
Well, they're different from us in terms of American healthcare. We like to start early. I don't know. I had a gallbladder taken out some years ago, my only surgery experience. And they're like, be there about 6:37. I'm like, good grief, that's really early. But now that I work in healthcare, of course, the last 25 years, so I know that we also have early starts. I sometimes see patients starting 7:15 in the morning. Well, in Ukraine, they don't get started till about 10. You'll go to a hospital and their operating theater with anesthesiologists and the orthopedic doctors and plastic surgeons and the nurses. They're just still getting together. And of course, all of us Americans are just chomping on the bit. We're ready to go. And then they love to work late. And we're like, hey, there's a curfew at midnight. If you get trapped after the curfew, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be arrested out on the street, even if you're an American, probably. We never pushed it, but you've got to be in by midnight. Curfew's over at about 5:30 in the morning. So they like to start late and they go late. And they had no problem. Like, let's go out to find something to eat. And we're like, there's restaurants open? And some of them were underground. It was very interesting because that's the safest place. So we ate. About half the places that were open that we got to eat were underground. And so you go down a couple flights of stairs and man, all of a sudden people are trying to live. They're trying to still exist and have normalcy as much as they can. And usually they're already for supper when I'm going to bed. So that's kind of interesting about working with the Ukrainians. I remember one story where I walked in and I was asked to translate prior to the surgery of a 6-year-old boy. And, calm him down. He was going to be intubated and they knocked out his front tooth because he's 6 and he had some loose teeth. And I said, give me the tooth. And all the Ukrainians were like, is this some kind of weird American thing? I said, just trust me. So I took the tooth, I wrapped it in gauze and I put a $10 bill and we slipped it in his pocket. When he came to after his surgery, which was kind of a dramatic thing, he had wounds in his neck. And our job was to extract some of the metal and cauterize, sew it up. A lot of tragic stories like that. We also worked on birth defects and other issues that were not as a result of the war. But they told him, they said, listen, an American tooth fairy came and he slipped something in your pocket. And he touched his mouth like, the tooth fell out. And he checked his pocket. There was the tooth and a $10 bill. I wish I could have got a video of that. He just was stunned. He's like, you saw the American tooth fairy? And the nurses were just kind of bawling. They just thought it was so touching. I tried to find some lunch in a downstairs cafeteria of that particular hospital around 1:00. And the lady in the lobby, as I crossed through, saw me and she jumped up and started hugging me and she was weeping like I'm about to. And I said, who are you? What's going on? She said, I'm the mother of that little boy that you put the $10. You have no idea how great that was for him and how meaningful that was. So we just really had a moment there. I talked to a lot of the Ukrainians and I go, when do you guys take a break? When do you go on vacation? Everybody in the hospitals. By the way, when you arrive at a hospital in the morning, it was amazing. You've got nurses, staff, janitors, doctors, the head of the hospital, the chairman, chairwoman, and they are out there out front. And they're clapping, they got chocolate, they have candy, they want you to drink some tea and coffee. They're so grateful that the Americans have come. It's extremely emotional to see that. And we're just so stunned at their gratefulness and their appreciation. And we're on TV quite a bit. There was a stretch, I think, of like 4 days that we were interviewed every single day by local, national television stations. Of course, I was featured a lot because I'm the American that speaks Ukrainian. And I would forget once in a while a word, try to, do my best. I was in a taxi one time and I was trying to get to a certain hospital. And I said to the fella as he looked at me, I said, "Hi." I said, "My name is Victor." I was trying to say in Ukrainian, "Dobry dень, мене звати Victor Cherkis." And he goes, "I know who you are. I watch TV." Then he said, "Why are you here?" He's kind of gruff. And I said, "I'm here because I love you." And he smiled. He thought that was probably the best answer I could have given. So so when I asked the Ukrainians, I say, "You guys ever take a break?" They're like, "We only take a break when the war is over. If our soldiers can't have a break, we are the second front." They look at the medical community as the second front. So they are just as important, they feel, to the war effort as everyone else. And they really are. One stunning thing that I might add is that I remember working with 16 soldiers on this one wing, and they had grievous wounds. I lost an eye, lost an arm, lost a leg. I was doing wound care. I was talking to them about their experiences. They were shocked that I was there to visit. A lot of them were very quiet at first. Soldiers don't like to talk. You just sit there, just kind of, ask them some basic questions and don't say stupid things. And finally, they're just so appreciative. You're working with them day after day on wound care. They see that you're right there with them. You're not asking for anything in return. And they really opened up. And I had a commanding officer come from the front, from Bakhmut, and he said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing for our soldiers." And I said, "Yeah, I'm doing whatever I can to get them back home to their people." Like Forrest Gump got shot in the rear end, and he's licking his ice cream and he's going home. I could not believe it. I found out that every one of those guys, amputees, missing an eye, they were going back. And I was like, "You're going back?" I said, "How are you going to do anything?" And they're like, "Oh no, every one of us has a job." I said, "Well, what does it take to get out of combat and being on the front line?" And they all looked at me. They said, "You don't understand. We're not signed up for like a year or 2 years or 90 days. We're here till the end." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Either victory or until we're killed." I talked to one 24-year-old guy. I said, "What do you think is going to happen?" He said, "Oh, I'm a dead man." He said, I've been wounded twice. I'm not going to survive this." I said, "Then why are you doing this?" I said, "You've already got all kinds of wounds and scars." He said, "I'm fighting for future generations that are not yet born. They want to be in a free Ukraine, a democracy." And I just sat there and he said, "Why are you surprised?" And I said, "I just don't see this kind of sacrifice like you guys are talking. This is so moving to me." So, I can keep on going on. And I took money with me on one trip, $1,500 to give away. And nobody would take it. They refused to take any cash. They were insulted. They're like, "Listen," I said, "I want you to give, I just wanted to offer, can I help you with some extra food? Can I, maybe some clothing, need some equipment?" Nobody would take anything from me. So yeah, it was really remarkable. I have so many experiences working with the people that was amazing. They could not believe that a nurse could be a doctor. That concept was just over the top. So the nurses really latched onto that. So when I explained to them that you can have a doctor of nursing practice and you can assess, diagnose, prescribe, they just thought that it was the most wondrous thing. And it gave them a lot of hope for the future of Ukrainian healthcare. And the doctors, they just thought that was a really good thing. The surgeons that I talked to, they're like, "Yeah, the nurses are very smart. We can't work without them. With additional training, a lot of them can do quite a bit." So yeah, I could talk quite a bit on that. But thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share some of these experiences.
That's some incredible work you've put in, Dr. Vic. I heard you work with someone who received Ukraine's highest civilian award. What was that like?
Yes, I did not know that this unassuming, balding, bearded fella, he's probably about 5'6", just a cheerful, jovial fella. And I found out he was the head of this one hospital that we were working with. His name is Alexander Kalinchuk. And he's in the western part of the country. And I arrived to do dermatology consults. They had probably, I'm not kidding you, they probably had about 120 people that had lined up, winding down a staircase and out the door. And I remember we had a missile alert. You're supposed to go to shelter. Nobody was moving. I was like, "Do we go?" And they're like, we're not losing our place in line to see you." So I said, well, if you're staying in line, I guess I'll stay in line. And I was very, very busy working that day. By the way, before I tell you about Dr. Kalinchuk, that was an interesting day. I had to do dermatology consults at one hospital, and then about noon, I was supposed to catch a taxi and head over to the other one, which was, I guess it would have taken me maybe 45 minutes. Well, it was 1 o'clock. And the people at the other hospital are like, where are you? And I said, I still have people here at this first hospital. I am not finished. And I'm going as fast as I can, but there's dozens of people and they have a lot of needs. And the dermatology consults, that people had come from, 100 kilometers away, and they had stayed overnight. There was a lot of tough conditions. We're not talking acne or psoriasis. I mean, there were some serious autoimmune disorders and rare conditions that required time. And here's the thing, diagnosing was not so much the problem. It was prescribing. If I had the same tools in my toolbox like I do here in America, I could clear out a fifth of the hospital on the children's pediatric hospital. I could clear out, dozens of rooms. I didn't have that. So that was very frustrating. I'm trying to figure out what they have and how we can make that work. A lot of them are severe immunosuppressants. They were having no problem giving cyclosporin and methotrexate to children. And I'm like, wait, what? We don't have anything else. And they don't. So what happens is they're calling me at the other hospital, like, get on over here. So finally, about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm finally finished at the first place. And they said, well, just go out front. We have something for you to get you over there quick. So I thought they had a taxi. So I went out front. I looked around. I'm standing there by myself in my scrubs and my jacket, my little briefcase. There's nothing there except an ambulance. So the guy jumps out from the ambulance and he says, are you Victor Cherkasy? I said, yes, I am. He says, well, get on in. I said, the ambulance? He goes, trust me. And I said, where do I sit? He goes, come up front. So I sat in the front. He hits the siren. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. He said, this is the only way to get you to the other hospital without wasting time in traffic. And I actually have it on video where I'm sitting in the front with my iPhone and I'm recording this. And I'm like, well, this is my driver. And I'm going right now 60 miles an hour through the streets of this major Ukrainian city. And everybody's pulling aside. And I said, are you sure this is the way to do this? And he said, listen, you're from America. You only have so much time. Our people need you. This is an emergency. And we have it from the city, the mayor's office, that you Americans, we're going to get you from one place to the other as fast as we can. And we got there in about 12 minutes. I mean, everybody was pulling over, and I don't know what they thought the ambulance was carrying, but it's a guy with a dermatology background just from America trying to get there. So I got there and I meet this Dr. Alexander Kalinchuk, and we're working all afternoon, and finally, I'm chatting with one of the other doctors, and it's getting late. It's like 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'm exhausted. I haven't had anything to eat. My head is spinning. And he says, do you know who you're working with? I said, yeah. I mean, he's the head of the surgical hospital. He goes, oh, listen to me. He said, I want to show you a video. So he pulls out his phone, and there's a really shaky video. And what happens is, when the Russians first came, the first few days in Kiev, Dr. Kalinchuk was working at this hospital, and he refused to abandon his patients. Well, they all see out in the streets of the hospital people trying to make their way to shelter, and they're getting shot. And I'm watching this video, and Kalinchuk, he crawls on his hands and knees. He's wearing a parka. This is February 2022. There's little puffs of dirt all kicking around him. And these are sniper shots. This is bullets kicking around him. And he goes and he rescues civilians. He drags them back, and he goes again. And this little guy, this common guy that you would not think anything of, you think of, Medal of Honor winners, hero of the Ukraine. You would think, wow, this guy's got to be huge, 6'4", made of muscle. This guy goes out there and he's dragging patient after patient in that's wounded. And the Russians just can't shoot him. And he's hiding and he's darting. And I'm watching, I'm just, I'm thinking he's going to be killed, but he can't be killed because he's right in the other office right now. So I went and I said, I heard you did this. And he didn't want to talk about it. He's like, yeah, anybody would have done it. I said, I don't think so. and he was awarded by President Zelensky a very high honor. Well, we got to know each other, and we went to his office at one point. And I said, what's your story? What's your background? He goes, well, I'm here. I said, you have family? He says, yeah, I sent them to Spain. He has 2 small daughters for safety. And I said, when have you seen them? He says, I haven't seen them. I can't leave. I have to be here to run this hospital. I said, how often do you work? He says, I'm here 7 days a week, 24 hours. I live here in my office. I said, show me your office. He has a bunch of blankets on the floor. He rolled up his jeans for his pillow. And there's a little shower stall. That's his only comfort. And I said, let me buy you a mattress. He goes, don't you spend $1 on me. He said, make sure that you take care of the patients here, but I won't take anything from you. Well, I ended up buying a small mattress that I was able to find and, get him comfortable. And he was grudgingly happy about, this little bit. He says, I'm not going to take a mattress from anyone in this hospital. He says, we have too many patients. So yeah, this is an amazing man. And watching that sniper fire, it was out of this world experience.
The Hero of Ukraine Award. Dr. Kolinchuk sounds like a remarkable person.
He is. I checked on him in Facebook this morning before this podcast, and he was featuring some of the latest surgical techniques that he's coming up with in order to put people back together, both civilians and soldiers. And while war is terrible, it does push you to your limits creatively to really come up with some things that the rest of us will benefit once this war is over.
Now, what does the healthcare system there need specifically, and are they making any progress?
I met with Zelensky's deputy minister of health in Kiev on this last trip. I have some great experience from that. There was a few of us that were able to meet with him. By the way, we were very close to meeting Zelensky. I guess we can talk about that later. But yes, I met with him, and their main focus right now is supporting the frontline troops that are being wounded. They just don't have enough people in the healthcare system to process, to treat all the wounded and get them back to the front, those that can. And I mentioned earlier, guys without arms and legs, what they do is they just strap them into different carriers. Like one guy was showing me that he sits in the back of a pickup truck and he's got both arms, he's missing one leg, but he can shoot down drones and rockets and missiles that are heading to, civilian population. One man without an eye, he's going to be working as a driver. Another fella, he's going to be working in a frontline kitchen. Another guy that doesn't have a leg, he's going to be in a tank and he's going to be feeding. I'm not military. The big tank bullets into how you fire. So I just can't believe how they're adjusting, and they're going to be soon using more women. I've never seen more women in an army than I did when I was out there as well. And I'm afraid they will probably end up drafting them as well. But specifically, they are trying to develop an infrastructure that is completely changing over what they had in Soviet times. And the war has allowed nurses to become very aggressive in their gifts and working side by side with physicians, giving them respect and a place. So when people saw my scrub suit and translated Doctor of Nursing Practice, I ended up meeting the mayor of Lviv, Andriy Sadovy. Andriy Sadovy is 16 years the mayor there, a real mover and a shaker. And we were supposed to have like a 10, 15-minute meeting. It ended up going over an hour. And he wanted to show me his plans for a new hospital that he wants to build in Lviv and how all the specialties will be working one with another. That's another thing, is they feel that as knowledge grows bigger and people have to have more experience, they really are latching on to the idea of specialties and using the nurses to a greater extent than they have now. So I told them about our educational system, how nurse practitioners and physician assistants have developed in America, the role that they play mostly in primary care, but really making a difference. In dermatology right now, according to the American Academy of Dermatology, there's some 11,000 dermatologists. Well, about 1,000 are in research and they're semi-retired. That leaves about 10,000. Well, there's like 6,000 dermatology PAs and there's about 4,000 dermatology NPs. That's 10,000 right there. There's a 1-to-1 ratio right now in America in dermatology. So we're becoming a powerful force and influence as well. I'd love to see PAs and NPs under one umbrella. That's my dream before I go too far into retirement one day. I'd love to see that. But the healthcare system there is also terribly short on the medications. They talked to me and they said, listen, use your contacts in pharma. And I do consulting and speaking for a number of pharmaceutical companies. And they said, if it's approved by the American FDA, you've got to get it to us. Please, they're just begging for the medication. And so, for psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, for allergic urticaria, for asthma, the things that we can do and are available. And that's why they want to be part of the European Union as well, so they can have access to these medications for these people. They're very smart. They're very creative. I think Ukraine has the 4th highest per capita college-educated population in the world today. And engineering and medicine and education is way up there. That's like their top areas. So these people don't sit around playing Xbox all day. They are working at developing the country, and they want to see it democratic, free, and creative. And they were doing so well before the war. That's the thing that bothers me so much. And they got a lot of catching up to do.
Now, switching gears a bit, what was a typical day there for you like?
Well, I alluded to it earlier that we like to start early and get to where we have to be, and they start a little late. But scrubbing up, we were given our daily orders. We did have someone from the government who kind of directed us every day, and they were like, okay, you're going to be 3 days at this hospital. We need you at this children's hospital. On the other hand, here, this person, you're going to be working plastic surgery on soldiers. And when we first started arriving in our earlier trips, they really kept us away from the soldiers. They said, we've got this. They were worried about security. Once they found out who we are, what our backgrounds are, what we're available to do, it was unrestricted. They were like, absolutely, we need you with our soldiers. We don't have enough. And they were very, very grateful. We generally would stay at a hotel. The hotels are closed for the most part, but they had some really nice hotels, and they charged us just a basic rate. And I was grateful to the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine, Leap Global Missions also in particular, and they helped pay for these hotels, which were in American monies was not that much. And these people had a job, which was to take care of us, and they gave us the grandest breakfast you can imagine. We had these chefs who were like, we were made to make food, and we don't have a job now without tourism, and we just want to get you guys fed. Lunchtime, basically, I would go out sometimes and find kind of a market, and it was open air, and I would just buy bags of fruit and granola bars, something to that effect. Since I spoke the language, they sent me out. Then I would bring it back to our doctors, and we would just work mostly surgeries, except for myself, where I was able to work with like Dr. James Sun, Suen, from Arkansas. He's one of the most professional, smartest, amazing individuals I'll ever meet on God's green earth. And I can mention him because he's been interviewed nationally and articles have been written about him. He's done surgery on a number of presidents. He's got presidents' phone numbers on his phone. And it was nothing for him to pick it up and call a retired president. And I was sitting next to him when these things happened. And he is 82 years old. And I got to work with him very, very closely because he doesn't speak Ukrainian. Some of the Ukrainians have no idea of English. And so here I am, and he's trying to tell me to tell their doctor, now do this cut, but don't cut the third trigeminal nerve. And I'm like, how do I translate third trigeminal nerve? I had a book that I would once in a while look at because my parents never taught me that word. And I tried to figure it out. We did fine. I sweat a lot. Now, I'm younger than Dr. Sun. He's 82. And every day that I worked with him side by side through all these surgeries, closures and injections and wound care and translating, I would have to sit down after a few hours and he'd go, what's wrong with you? I said, I'm 82. And I said, my legs are giving out. I'm cushy dermatology. I get to sit on a stool a lot of the day. And this guy, I couldn't keep up with him. He was amazing. I look forward to our next trip where I can be with him. So a typical day there is just working. Just surgery, surgery, surgery. And we did not finish usually till about 9 or 10. We did have a few doctors that got caught and had to stay at the hospital, missed curfew, and they just, slept the night there. It was something else. We did have air raid alerts almost every day, and that was stressful because that meant they were coming in where you are. And that was a part of it. I'm not military, but it was amazing what you could adjust to.
Did you have any opportunities to get out of the hospitals and meet people?
I did, thanks to my Ukrainian ability. Everybody tried to have at least an afternoon off once while we were there. And I was fortunate because my background allowed me to go to different hospitals and interact with people. One of my taxi rides, once he found out who I was and recognized me from TV, had a lot of questions. And when we finished our ride, he said, "I want to show you something." He reached into his pocket and he pulled out a jagged piece of metal. I said, "What's this?" He said, "A few weeks ago, right on this street where I'm dropping you off, a Russian rocket came down, and the fragment, the shrapnel, hit my hood." He said, "Here, come on out, I'll show you." And a gash in the front, and it hit the windshield and ricocheted right past him. So he went back, and behind the car, he saved this piece of shrapnel, which could have killed him depending on the trajectory of it. And he showed me where the rocket had fallen. I said, "Well, it's hard to see. Everything is all clean." He says, "Oh, in Ukraine, we believe in the shattered window theory, which is if we don't rebuild as fast as possible or clean something up, it just brings everything down. So we repair things as fast as possible." And they do have crews that just, stop the fires, lift everything up, and they try to go back to normalcy as much as possible. I remember being at one street corner, and I guess I smile too much. In Ukraine, there's a saying, if somebody's standing there smiling, he's either an idiot or an American, because they just don't have people walking around smiling. And it's kind of true. They seem sad, but as soon as they get to know you, there's a lot of smiling. But I'm an American. I smile at people, and they're like, "Okay, he's probably an American, or watch out." And I got latched on by some gypsy girls. And gypsies are groups that move all across Europe. A lot of them are from Romania. And these three girls grabbed me. And I have video of this because I knew who they were. I knew what they were doing. And they were like, "Tato, pridi do domu, mama čekає na tebe." And they were saying, Daddy, come home. Mommy is waiting for you. Where are you?" And I knew it was a scam, and they were trying to get into my pockets and steal something. And I was like, "Look, number one, I might be an American, but I know the scam." And I looked across the street, and there was these two very large, swarthy-looking guys staring at me from a car, and they were their minders. And I pulled out my camera to start taping them, and they ran off because they do not like to be exposed. And I said, "Listen, I know who I'm married to, and I know who my children are. So, and you're not them." I went into an Army-Navy store in one city on my last day, and I wanted to buy some patches to bring back as souvenirs and, like insignia, things like that. And I came to the door, and apparently you can't go in unless you are a member of the military. So there's these two guys standing guard, and I explained to them, I said, "I'm not a Ukrainian. I'm not in the military. I'm here serving in this city." And a guy was walking in. He goes, "Hey, I know this guy. I've seen him on TV." I mean, that happened a lot. And let him in. He's a good guy. He's here working on our soldiers. And I was like, "Oh, thank you very much." So I went in, and the guy kind of introduced me to the people at the front desk. They recognized me from the TV as well. They said, "Anything you want, you can have it. You don't even have to pay for it." I was like, "Come on, I'm paying for it." So I picked up like 40, 50 different patches, and I did end up paying. I said, "I'll leave a donation." They felt better about that. So I'm walking down this one aisle, and I said, "Excuse me." It was just kind of habit. I said it in English, which was kind of crazy. And the guy goes, "Oh, pardon me." And he said it in English. I said, wait. "You're an American." And he goes, "Yeah, you are too." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Oh, I'm from Texas." He goes, "There's a bunch of us here right now." I said, What are you guys doing here?" He said, "Well, we fought in Afghanistan. We're American veterans, and we believe in what's happening." I said, "Are you even supposed to be here?" They said, "No, we're all going to be in a lot of trouble, but we're here picking up gear." They call it kit. And they were getting all kinds of kit, caps and socks and bulletproof vests and things like that. And they had a special card that allowed them to get that. And I said, this is amazing. So they were wondering what I was doing there. They said, this is great. They need you. We're really proud of you. I said, I'm proud of you guys. I'm sorry that you're going to be in trouble for this. They said, we don't care. But yeah, there's Americans there as well. So I said something stupid. I said, let's get a picture together. Like, absolutely not. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't think about that. But, I wish them the best. And I kind of gave them a hug. They gave me a hug. They said, tell the world that these are people worth fighting with. And I met another guy, an advisor, and this was at a government building. I'll be careful how much I share. And I said to him, I said, look, first of all, I know you're not just an advisor. And he kind of smiled. I said, I don't know your background or what you're doing, but why aren't we helping even more? He said, the problem with the American government was that we had just come out of Afghanistan and we left a lot of equipment back there. And we thought the Afghan army would fight the Taliban and keep Afghanistan free. And they said, we thought the same thing would happen with the Ukrainians. We didn't think the Ukrainians would fight. And we just kind of gave a little because we didn't want it to end up in Russian hands. So they said, that's been our mistake. And we're trying the best we can to rectify that. So I was invited to a number of people's homes, and I did get to see people later in the evening, and they were so appreciative, and they brought their neighbors. And I think the thing they marveled most of all is that somebody would willingly choose to come to a place of war and do service and not ask for anything in return. They just thought that was remarkable.
We're glad you were able to spend some time getting to know the locals. Tell us a little bit about the patients you met, Dr. Vic. Were there some encounters that stand out to you?
Yeah, I found a toy store in every town that I would go to and find the owner and see if they would open up. And I told them that I would pay top dollar. I'll pay for anything. And I would get hundreds of dollars worth of giant shopping bags of toys. And I remember at one children's hospital, I walked into this girl's room and she had been wounded. Mother was there. That was the other sad thing was it was always hospitals with no lights on, no internet service. Lunch was a woman bringing a giant pot of soup down the hall. People would bring out these bowls and spoons and they would fill it up. And that was their lunch. It's not like what we think here. And I would walk to these different rooms to hand out gifts. And I have to tell you, some Americans, patients even, would slip me $100 bill, $50 bill, do this for the children. And I did. Every dollar went to buying these toys, and I had the pictures in the video. So I walked into this one girl's room. She's probably 9, and I asked where Dad was, and he was fighting at the front. Not always fighting. A lot of single mother families now in Ukraine, this first year of the war, a lot of people have been killed. And there's a lot of guys in their 50s and 60s out there now. But I asked the girl, I said, listen, I have books, coloring books. I have some toys. I have puzzles here for you. I've got a little doll here, stuffed animals. What would you like? And she kind of rummaged around and she pulled out the bottom of this one bag I had. It was a gun that shot darts. And she said, I'll take that. And I said, you don't really want a gun, do you? I was kind of like stereotypical traditionalist. Maybe the boys want that. Maybe I didn't even think about what we were just taking off the shelves. She goes, no, absolutely. She said, I wanted to do this to protect my country. And it was like, yikes. Just didn't know where that conversation was going to go. So I have to tell you one story. I know that this might be a little longer of a podcast, but you're asking me about some of the patients that I met. Let me just tell you this one story to our listeners. I came to this one soldier's hospital, and I wasn't there 1 hour, and a woman, Dr. Vera, tracked me down, and she was a pediatric surgeon. She said, I heard that you came, and I need you. You speak Ukrainian, and I really, really need you. I said, what's going on? She said, in the city of Kherson, south of where I was, there was a young man, 13, with his brother, 6 years old. That was Mikita and Kolya. And with their mom. Dad was fighting at the front, and the rocket shelling from the Russian side was getting particularly fierce. And the mom said, you know what, let's go down to the basement. So they went down to the basement. We call it the Pidval. And no sooner had they got there when the Russian rocket slammed into the house, knocked the roof down. The force of that roof came down on the first floor where they had just been, and then brought the first floor and the roof down on top of them. Mom was knocked out. I met Mom. She was there. She doesn't remember anything from that experience. The 13-year-old, Mikita, He had broken arm, a lot of lacerations, and handsome fella, black coal eyes, no response. I said, how long has he been here? And they said 6 weeks, hasn't said a word. Mom's there constantly, try to get him to talk, just to start opening up and share. He's in a state of shock. His eyes don't focus. He just slowly turns his head. He doesn't even seem to comprehend. I brought him some gifts. I tried to engage him in conversations. I came to him 3 times a day for about 5 days when I was stationed there. The brother, Kolya, was with Mikita, standing next to him in that pidval, that basement, when everything came crashing down. Mikita was crushed but surviving. He couldn't move his head the way the floor had fallen. And when he opened his eyes in the dim light, his brother was facing him, dead. And for 3 days, by the time the shelling stopped and they were able to find that the house had fallen and they were able to start removing the roof and then the first floor, for 3 days, every time he'd open his eyes, his dead brother was in front of him. When I heard that story, I wept. I'm not going to lie to you. I've only cried a few times the last few years. Once when we had to put our 16-year-old dog down, and when I heard this story. And then when I got myself composed, I went to the kid and I just held him. And I put my arms around him and I stroked his hair. And I was like, brother, I came all the way from America for you. I'm here because I care about you. I love you, Nikita. You're my, це моя батьківщина, це моя сім'я. This is my cultural roots. You're part of my family. Please, you've got to start opening up and sharing what you've gone through so you can heal. And 3 times a day I would come to him. No response. Finally, I said goodbye to him. I talked to Dr. Vera. I said, keep me in touch. I just need to know. And I'm so sorry we weren't able to make a difference. So I left. We crossed over to Poland. We flew back to the United States. I was home 5 hours when I got a messenger, and it was a picture of Dr. Vera with Mikita. His eyes were alight, open. He had a faint smile. She's hugging him. And she says to me, when you didn't arrive, he looked around and he said his first words, "De tvoj amerikanski likar?" Where is that American doctor? And he just was looking for me. So that is one of the most tremendous things. He's getting counseling. He's not the same, but he's talking. And they moved him and his mom to a safer place in Europe. So he is getting help.
That's very honorable of you, Dr. Vic. Thanks so much for sharing that personal story. Speaking of honorable, did you meet President Zelensky?
Well, I got within 2 hours of meeting Volodymyr Zelensky. And, my wife and I flew 2019 to Kiev for his inauguration. I'd watched his TV show. He's a comedian. Now, for the record, he's also a businessman, and he does have a degree in law. He's a lawyer. Huge sense of humor, very funny. And I went to his inauguration. Well, here I return after the war has begun, and I have met a lot of people in government. And I met Anna Pertova. She is a mover and a shaker. She's one of his closest aides. We came within 2 hours of meeting him. You can't have anything with you, no phone. They told us ahead of time, we're going to be in a van. You're not going to know where you're going. No pens or pencils allowed on you. He's very well protected because he's a huge target, obviously. And within 2 hours of our 6 o'clock meeting, it was about 4 p.m., they said, we're not going to be able to meet him. But I asked Anna if I could make a recording for him. And I did a 10-second recording on her phone. And she swore to me and told me later that, yes, he did see it. And he laughed. And yeah, it was a little private personal message. And I'm glad that I made him laugh a little bit.
Yet another remarkable person. Do you have any predictions for the future of Ukraine and the war?
I'm not a prognosticator. Naturally, I'm a Ukrainian myself. My hope, of course, is that Russia will just, shrug their shoulders and say, we can't do this. Remember, Russia spent 10 years trying to take Afghanistan from 1979 when they invaded to 1989. They suffered 10,000 deaths, right? Right now it's estimated they've got 350,000 casualties. They left Afghanistan on the basis of about 10,000 deaths and 50,000 wounded, right? Now we're talking 350,000 to 400,000 casualties. And I can't imagine how their healthcare system is overwhelmed. So they want Ukraine, but they want Ukraine as badly as Ukraine does not want to be a part of Russia. And this is their chance, their one and only chance Ukraine feels to really survive. And I talked to grandmothers who said, if I saw a Russian soldier outside my home, she said, I'll pick up a stick and throw a rock. I'll do whatever I can. This is a population that is unbelievably motivated to be free. Here's the thing. Every time I would visit Ukraine before the war, you could speak Ukrainian, you could speak Russian, you would speak American for those, English for those who knew English. Nobody batted an eye. Nobody shrugged their shoulders. There's people that are related to both countries. There's a Russian man that married a Ukrainian woman. We just really didn't talk politics too much. It wasn't a big deal. You would fly Ukrainian Airlines. They gave 3 announcements. It was Ukrainian, it was Russian, it was English. That's the way it was. Right now, thanks to this invasion and the horrors and the atrocities committed by Russian troops against Americans, the injustice of it all, right? Targeting civilian buildings, killing children, enslaving people. There's a lot of trade of Ukrainians into Russia where they're brainwashing them. The anger is so palpable. I don't think people are going to speak Russian in Ukraine for the next 100 years. I was there when someone said, instead of "Dyakuyu," which is thank you in Ukrainian, they, reflexively said "Spasiba." And everybody in the room just kind of put their finger to their lips like, hush, like you said it in Russian. So, wow, I never saw that before, but that's the palpable anger. So my prediction to this is if America does fulfill its obligation to the treaty, the Budapest Memorandum, and Europe does maintain its influx of support, that the pain of trying to take over Ukraine will be too much. I blame Russian mothers on all of this. I really can't believe that they're allowing a lot of their children to go to fight in this war of invasion, this imperialist project, this empire building. Why can't we all get along, right? But they have to hang on to Ukraine. And it's a very ambitious thing on their part. But I think sometimes you can choke on things you try to swallow. And I really hope that's what happens.
Thanks for sharing your insights on the future of Ukraine, Dr. Vic. One final question. I was told that you see a lot of Ukrainian refugees as patients in your offices in Tennessee. How did that happen, and what is that like?
Yeah, you heard right. We have in Cleveland, Tennessee, where I live for the last 25 years, the highest per capita population of Ukrainians of any city or town in all of Tennessee. They're all here. And I sometimes come home very tired and I tell my wife, please don't hand out my phone number anymore. I think all thousands of them have my number and they're looking for help. Wouldn't you? I mean, seriously, if you came, you talk to the Ukrainians, they're like, I cannot believe I'm in America. And they're not saying it cheerfully. They're like, I loved where I lived in Ukraine. I had a wonderful life. I had a job. I had a home. I had my garden, my family, my culture, my language. I could have visited America one time. I didn't expect to live here. And it's not where I want to be the rest of my life. I want to go back. There are thousands of them here. And the thing that drew them to Cleveland, Tennessee, of all places, is that we had 4 churches of different denominations, Christian background. There's Baptist, Pentecostal, Seventh-day Adventist, and they came here because others invited them. My wife and I started a ministry along with some others here called 501c, called Providence Haven Ministry or Mission. And what we did was we helped start with a group of Ukrainians already living here, a warehouse. And the warehouse allows Ukrainian refugees to come here and apply for aid outside of the government. People make donations of furniture and clothes and suitcases and toys and silverware, whatever. And they come there to the warehouse. We volunteer, and people can come and take anything they want that they need, and within reason. So they come and they're very appreciative and they're grateful. So they get to working. I talked to the mayor, Kevin Brooks, here in Cleveland, Tennessee. He said, we love our Ukrainian refugees because they'll buy homes that are run down, and within 6 months to a year, they're already working. They got their green cards, they're fixed up their property, and the area values go up. So they all come to me. A lot of them say, hey, while I'm here, while you're looking at my rash, can you check me on my diabetes? Also, can you help me with my cardiac medication? Also, I'm still suffering from anxiety. Can you give me some medication for that? And I'm like, guys, I can't. I'm so sorry, but I'm not DEA approved to write these medications. That's not part of my licensure. I'm dermatology. So I try to help them a lot every single day. I have 4, 5, 6 Ukrainian patients, and I swear some of our medical assistants are already learning the language, and I have to translate, of course. You know, what's interesting about the Ukrainians, I'll make fun of my culture a bit, but I tease them too, is that our people are leery of modern medicine. They're like, I'll say, listen, this is called malignant melanoma. I got the report back. Thank you for trusting me. And we're going to go ahead and have some surgery. It's superficial. Fortunately, we're going to fix it. Well, can I drink tea? Well, what if I change my diet? How about essential oils? I'm like, will you stop it? And I just tease them. I go, you've got to trust me. So they are considered the most religious people in all of Europe by survey, and they counted that as church attendance. So I'm always invited to the area churches. I go to the weddings. I go to baptisms. I'm invited to a lot of dinners. And I'm kind of the head of state sometimes at some of these places, and they're just so grateful. But on the other hand, it hasn't been easy. They're very traumatized. I'll never forget my wife's and I, great idea of bringing all these families to our house. We have a big yard, and we bought fireworks. And we're like, we want to introduce you to the 4th of July. We started exploding the fireworks. I cannot believe I was so stupid. That was the last thing people traumatized by rockets, drones, missiles, bombs needed to hear. We had kids crying. We had parents in shock. And I'm like, I am so sorry. That night that we first did this barbecue, welcome to America with fireworks as you've left war. My wife was frantically trying to stop the fireworks. She tripped and fell and broke her left arm in 3 places. And it was, of course, then the Ukrainians felt so bad for us that for the next 3 to 4 months, they just brought us all the food because she couldn't cook. And I ate very, very well there for months. And I said, I can't wait for you to break your other arm so I can put on some more weight, which my wife still loves me. We can tease each other. But yeah, thank you about asking about our Ukrainian refugees. And they're a true treasure, but they want to go home. They want to go home.
Dr. Vic, I want to thank you for taking the time to share with us today. Our podcast with you is certainly a departure from our usual topics, but nevertheless, I believe our audience will find your experiences fascinating. Please stay safe in your travels, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the near future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate so much the NP Journal allowing me to participate in this. As we say in Ukrainian, as I told Volodymyr Zelensky on that private message, I said, "Все буде Україна, аж до перемоги." I said, everything will be Ukraine again, all the way to victory. So thank you again.
Thanks so much.
For more great content from the Nurse Practitioner, be sure to visit us online at tnpj.com for the latest NCPD articles, columns, and much more. Please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, as it helps with the podcast's visibility and helps us to keep bringing you this great content. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at The Nurse Practitioner Journal, and on Twitter at TNPJ_journal. Thanks for listening. This podcast does not constitute medical advice and should not be taken as such, and does not replace professional judgment or advice. The ideas and viewpoints expressed on this podcast do not reflect the official position of the speakers, authors, affiliated organizations, the Nurse Practitioner Journal, or Wolters Kluwer. Please note that the hosts of the Nurse Practitioner podcast are not clinicians. However, we created the Nurse Practitioner podcast to bring you relevant clinical information by NPs for NPs. Thanks again for listening.